Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Management Defect Framework Think Tank on LinkedIn Live. I'm excited to discuss this topic. This one's an ode to my 7th and 9th graders who are just started school again this year for their new school year. Broken telephone, the cost of miscommunication. And I think when you hear some of the numbers that I was able to research and find with this, you'll find it actually staggering, the amount of cost and the amount of impact miscommunication has on projects, on teams in every organization. And you can think about your experience and you can think about how this has worked for you in the past, but for me, I don't see organizations actively working on clearing this up. And I think a lot of the work that we have identified in the management defect framework is actually a great way to help solve some of these problems as we get into it. We'll talk about broken telephone and the cost of miscommunication. That one makes me smile. We'll talk about what's a management defect, and we'll go through the framework and how you can apply it to help your organization or team get more with the team you have and spend less time doing it. I usually do some quotes. This time I came up with some surveys, but I'm going to start this with the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I'm going to draw on my personal experience over the last 15 years working on these large 8 and 9 figure projects and discuss the actual cost of the miscommunications there. We're going to start with the good because we always like to start things off in a really positive way. This one was a real success story. This was at Loyalty One, which was parent company for Air Miles here in Canada. And we had been replacing their call center CRM application. And the entire company, the entire organization went agile, which was very interesting. As I've mentioned in previous discussions, it really made you question, what's my role? How can I do it? How is what I'm doing impacting other people? But the thing that they did really well is we had about 100 people working together, about 5 Scrum teams with impacts to about 20 different applications outside of our team. And while each of the teams ran their daily huddles and daily scrums, I was, guess at the time we were doing safe, or a version of safe, so you could call it a release train engineer, release manager. I was running that part of the program, and so I would run a daily scrum of scrums meeting. And the real great part of that is the idea was everybody who was blocked, everybody who had challenges, instead of going directly to somebody and having a side conversation or people not being on the same page and having different problems, we got everybody together. There was a board of all the problems in the organization related to this project. And as a group, and it was a pretty large group, at some points we were over 30 people, we were able to swarm these issues and address them directly. And it wasn't a side conversation. And you're going to hear me say a side conversation a lot, because the impact of a side conversation is, oh, I've spoken to this person and maybe I have resolved the problem between the two of us, but how's that information cascaded down to the teams? And so by being able to visualize the work on this gigantic Scrum of Scrums board, being able to have the key leaders from each of those teams all participating in the discussion, there were obviously overlaps in the problems that we were receiving. Oh, you fixed problem A? Oh, well, I have that exact same problem. Let's work together faster to do it. Or now I know there's a solution, or now I know here's the way that we're going to operate. By aligning that communication, by bringing everybody together, we avoided a lot of miscommunication that can happen on a program that big and impacting so many systems and so many teams that large. That was a real win. That one, ding, that one gets checked in the win column. The bad, this one, unfortunately, this has happened on too many projects and programs for me. And even outside of the actual work doing on projects, the operations teams or even just the leadership teams, it's the broken telephone of making these changes. And it's a side conversation where a grand decision, a grand proclamation gets done. The scope will be X and we will all follow, except that person is preaching to one or two people, and that subsequently doesn't get cascaded down to the team, and it doesn't get cascaded outwards to the impacted teams. And so the problem you had there, the real bad, is that you have a grand proclamation of the change in direction, but you don't have the people who are actually doing the work, understanding the change and being able to pivot. So they're still continuing on some of the work in a certain direction. That's wasted time, that's wasted money, that's wasted effort, that's a lot of frustration. And you get a lot of apathy. As the bigger the change, the more apathy you're going to get. And so it's on leadership to have that communication to explain, why are we doing it? What is the change? How is this going to help us all? And what's my role in it? How can I help? A lot of people in management, it's top down. It's give me the date, give me the dollar. That's all I care about. And we need to change the way we think. And Agile has these great principles about servant leadership, where as a leader, my role is to help unblock your work. And part of that is communication, just straight up. How can you do that job better by unblocking those people's work? And part of that is telling them that there's a change. How about full stop? The Titanic needs to stop and do a complete 180. It happens all the time. How are you preparing your team to make that change, to fail fast, fail quickly, and jump right back on that new course and get everybody moving towards the same goals? That was one of the bad. Now let's talk about the ugly. That one is very interesting. I've also actually had this on multiple programs. I'm not going to get into the ones that they were, but I'll talk about the challenges with them. Back at the start of my career, I was on a very large program, and one of the issues was we had the IT PMO was from one consultant vendor, the business PMO was from a different consultant vendor. We had a group of independent and employees in the middle, and they wouldn't share statuses between them. You, in an organization that works in a healthy way, it's one team. It's that one team model. It's not IT versus business. It's not one contractor versus another vying for positioning. It's just straight up, how can all of us as a team move this forward? And unfortunately, the ugly was really there was teams that were not providing their dates. And so how can you come up with a plan? How can you do your work if you can't understand where your partners are? And it got to the point where, unfortunately, one of the vendor groups ended up getting kicked out because it couldn't be a cohesive unit. We didn't have the right people, and it was causing a lot of financial impact. It's not just, oh, well, that person is not giving me the information. It's, you've delayed my project another month. I have $1 million run rate. You, by not sharing that information, have just cost me $1 million. Who's going to pay for that? How are we going to deliver? How are we going to recoup all of this? And so there are lots of dollars at stake when you think about the impacts of miscommunication, especially in large organizations, especially on 8 or 9 figure projects or programs that are going. You can't afford miscommunication or misdirection. That one gets the big ugly right there for not sharing, not coming to the table and acting as one team. We talked about in the past also, just switching gears, still about team empowerment and the opposite of miscommunication, which is communication, working as one team, and feeling like you're heard. And there was a study by Salesforce done in 2017, and one of the interesting things from it, it's no surprise you're going to get this answer, but feeling heard made people 4.6 more times likely to feel empowered to do their work. And empowerment in your job, I find, is a very important yet often ignored key. Feeling like you're empowered to help solve a problem, one, gives you personal growth, gives you personal satisfaction. Two, sets the tone in your organization, in your group, in your team, that you're seeing a problem and you can be an advocate for change. You can be the one driving the bus, and it's not just, oh, I have to wait and see what is happening with management. How are they telling me how to do things? Think about that when you're talking to your team. Listen to your team. Get feedback from your team. A lot of times they're the ones who are on the ground doing the work, yet don't have a voice at the table. And having that engagement with them will, one, probably open up a lot of problems you didn't know about, and two, make them feel empowered to help you. Here's a question to ask your organization, and I was doing this with the team yesterday. Ask this question: with your job and the process you're working on, what's one thing we could do to make it better, to go faster, so you can do less work? If you're going to ask somebody how they can work less, you're going to get a lot of feedback, a lot of positive feedback, maybe not on the process that needs to be changed, but you're going to get somebody who's empowered, who's going to come up with ideas on how they can change the culture. And if everybody is working on changing the culture, then you have a culture of change. You have a culture where everybody is rallying behind, we need to do better, not I'm punching a clock, or I just need to do exactly what I'm told. It's a nice little thinker. As I mentioned, this topic, it was an ode to my kids in grade 7 and grade 9, starting at new schools. We got junior high, we've got high school. And I'm just going to take a lesson that they gave for me that really is missing in corporate culture right now. And that is, classroom, all eyes up front on the teacher. All eyes on me. Now, we all know we're multitasking in meetings. We all know we are overbooked with meetings to do our jobs. That gives us a very small amount of time to actually do the work. But we all need to realize that there is time where you have to put the pen down and you have to actively listen to who's speaking to you, to understand what they're saying and how, as a team, you can move things forward. I think a lot about this with eyes up front, pay attention to the teacher. It's not about, oh, I'm the teacher, you have to listen to what I'm saying. It's more, we're so busy, we're on a million different devices. Our communication channels are fundamentally flawed. There is email, there is Teams, you get SaaS management tools like Jira spitting out every time there's a change, shooting that over to you. There are so many different ways to communicate with people. How can you keep your team focused on your goal? How can you have a meeting where everybody's paying attention or everybody's in person? I think back to when I was a Scrum Master for one of my groups. I used to bring everybody into the room. We had lots of whiteboards, which was wonderful. But my first rule of the meeting was laptops close. And that, for some people, was actually impossible to do. I'm asking for a simple request. We have 15 minutes. I want the floor so that we can all have a discussion, that you're actively listening, not working on coding, working on an emergency, working on a status, working on a different item. And it was very difficult. But after practicing over and over, it went from a room of wallflowers where people were shy to use their voice to over 2 or 3, 4 sessions, having those people actually leading the sessions and all of the laptops getting closed, and us using that 15 minutes to get laser focused and get things done so effectively. It's a little takeaway from my kids, eyes on the teacher. Another piece with miscommunication, and this one every single person has had in their, not even just lifetime, they probably have had it in the last month in any job and sometimes in life. And that's conflicting priorities are not interpersonal conflicts. If there is a disagreement at work and one team wants to do it strategy A and one team wants to do strategy B, and they're polarizing and they don't agree with each other, that doesn't mean that the person who is proposing option A and the person who are proposing option B are in a fight or have issues. You can have all these discussions in a respective way, and being objective and focusing solely on the item that you're trying to tackle takes away the emotions from it. It's not about being a robot and having no emotions, but it's also understanding that this person has a perspective. They want to do things their way. Maybe they don't have enough resources on their team, and I'm asking for more than what they have. Well, maybe I need to come to the table and spend that money, or maybe I need to look at their situation and empathize and strategize how we can work as one team to solve one problem. That is always a key piece of the messaging. It's part of agile servant leadership that I love to kind of lead by, because you are building consensus with every single discussion that you have, even when you come into situations where, we've all been in nuclear situations in a room where things are about to explode. Well, how can you empower yourself to force that change? Change the way that things are being explained. Focus on the facts. Speak only about the outcome and not what got you there. Playing the blame game is not effective. It doesn't help. It's not good for the ego. It's not good for the career. We talk about career limiting moves. That's one of them. Starting to make things personal. You need to understand where your colleagues are coming from, and you need to understand how together you can swarm a problem and get it in. I've done a lot of in IT. You do a lot of production implementations. You're up all night. Sometimes it's an easy one where you're only up to 2 or 3 hours in the middle of the night, and sometimes you're up for 36 hours straight, and people are up all night. Emotions get very strained with less sleep. And actually, the best implementation I've ever been on happened a few months back. And it was all because everybody was respectful of each other, and it was a common goal that we were focusing on. Yes, something went bad. Yes, we had to pull some people in, but at no point was there a raised voice. Every discussion was objective on how do we solve this problem, and keeping it light. There's nothing wrong with having a couple of jokes. There's nothing wrong with trying to keep everybody's spirits up, especially in a moment of tension. And that was a learning for me there. And that all came to positive communication, right? Like not taking these things personally, not using my frustrations or venting my frustrations or having other people vent their frustrations, and just working together on that common goal. If I look at the 10,000-foot view of miscommunication, one of the I would say easy way. There's probably nothing that's easy to do, but one of the simplest ways and most effective ways is centralize information, centralize reporting. If you're a small organization, there are lots of free tools that cost you nothing to implement. In fact, Jira for up to 10 users costs you nothing. Those kinds of tools can gather information, can set you up with reporting, can give your team the chance to visualize your issues, your risks, how your releases are coming in, set up customized dashboards. And when you're having status meetings, everybody can see all the information. So you reduce this miscommunication. And when you're able to visualize all the work, then you're going to get people chiming up with suggestions on how to solve problems. You're not just even avoiding miscommunication, but you're building team retention, you're building team cohesion and trust. That's a